Hello everybody, and welcome to our virtual 67 Pall Mall. Later today we'll be speaking with Marco Ricasoli Ficolfi from Rosso de Montegrosso in Chianti, and then with the wild and wonderful Adi Badenhorst in Swartland, South Africa, followed by the lovely Veronique Sanders in Pessac Léognan at Haute-Bailly. And finally, an overview of the Napa Valley with author Kelly White. For now, we'll be speaking with Mark and Sarah Driver, who are living the dream of owning their own sparkling wine estate down in Essex. So please chat away on the side, tell us what you're drinking, where you're drinking it from, and also share on social media with hashtag 67 from home. As usual, we'll have 15 minutes at the end. Please use the Q&A box rather than the chat box. So I hope you have a bottle of Rathfinny wine open, and a big welcome to Mark and Sarah. Hey guys.
Now, we can't see anybody, so that's slightly weird. We're talking to ourselves, but please feel free to ask questions as we go along. And the way we thought we'd do this is spend about 10 or 15 minutes just doing a brief introduction about us and our journey, and also about the estate in Sussex. And then we will move on to taste our classic cuvee, and then our blanc de blanc, and then have the question session at the end. But as I say, please feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we'll try and monitor them on the side as we go. So, setting the scene for those of you who may not know us, Rathfinny Wine Estate is based in Sussex. We are in the village of Alfriston, which is between Eastbourne and Brighton. And if you know Glyndebourne, we're very close to Glyndebourne, and we're just 3 miles from the sea. So we've got about 600 acres of land, of which about, I think, half are...
A little bit less, about 220 acres now planted with vines.
Yeah. And at the most, we will probably only have about 350 or 400 acres planted. Yeah.
However, if you say that to a Frenchman, that you have 400 acres, they'll fall off their chair. But you have to remember that our density of planting is a lot lower in England than it is in France, or pretty much anywhere on the continent. So we're typically planting about 4,000 vines per hectare, as opposed to 10 or up to 12,000 in parts of the continent.
Okay, so our estate, as I say, is a single site estate. It's family owned, it's Mark and myself, and we have 4 children who in various guises are involved in the business. And we now have 2 restaurants on the site. One is in the Michelin Guide, and the other one is more of a family run home from home. And we also have a place for people to stay on site. So that sort of sets the scene of where we are. It's really exciting. Mark's going to try and put some pictures up, so bear with us. It's really exciting for us because this is, believe it or not, our 10-year anniversary of this project. So we're looking there at our south-facing slopes.
Yeah. Shall I talk a bit about that?
Yeah.
Yeah? What do you think? So, I wanted to show you the picture because I think a picture really sets the scene and tells the story of where we are. So Sarah said what we're looking at there is our vineyard. So that's the Rathfinny vineyard. In the middle is our winery and our wine store and bottle processing. And then we've got some accommodation called the Flint Barns down towards the end of the estate. But essentially we're in this fantastic fold in the South Downs, in the South Downs National Park. And in front of us, there's a ridge of land which goes up to about 120 meters or so, which protects us from the worst of the southwesterlies because we're only 3 miles from the sea. But what we've got is this beautiful slope. And for those who haven't visited, I think a few of you who are on the call may have visited Rathfinny. But we've got this lovely south-facing slope. We're right on chalk, which is, you know, the holy grail really for sparkling wine, particularly sparkling wine grapes. We've got this lovely little microclimate because we're in this part of Sussex which sticks out into the sea, which means a lot of the worst of the weather tends to pass us by and go north. So it's one of the sunniest places in England. I believe Eastbourne, which is only 6 miles away, still holds the records as being the sunniest place in England. So that sort of sets the scene. I'll stop sharing that particular picture now, and then we can go back to So there we go. Then we can just talk about what we're doing. Then we can see the Q&A as well. The main thing is that we're often asked about our wine styles, and the thing that we are trying to express within our wines, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is the fact that the wines really express the fruit, what the French like to call the terroir. It's the fruit, it's the purity of fruit really, which we're trying to express through into the glass. We use very little oak, we use very little additives. We're really trying to produce wines which are really expressive of the quality of the fruit that we produce at Rathfinny. So do you want to talk a little bit about this year and why it's so special? And then I could talk about a little bit about the 2016 vintage.
Yeah, so as I was touching on before, it's 10 years since we started this project. Roland thought people might be interested. He said we were living the dream. Sometimes I wake up and wonder if that's the case. So Mark and I started this 10 years ago. Mark had been working in the city as a hedge fund manager, and he came home one day in October, and I was in this kitchen. We've got 4 kids and I was busy, and he said, oh, John and I decided to step back from the fund. And I thought, oh, okay. And you know, always that was in the idea 3 or 5 years ahead. This was October. And I said, oh, when are you going to do that? And he said, Christmas. So I nearly died. He was 46. He was going to be at home, driving me mad. But that started our journey, and Mark went back to university, went to Plumpton College and did his degree in viticulture. And here we are now, 10 years on. I wasn't going to be in the business so much. I am a lawyer by training. I worked for Herbert Smith in the city. And we say Mark is vision and I am detail. So that's just a little bit about our background. So 10 years on, we're really proud to present our first full portfolio of wines. And those are our Classic Cuvée, which is what we'll try first, our Blanc de Blanc. We'll touch briefly, but not be tasting our delicious Blanc de Noir. And we've also got a rosé. So that is our full portfolio. All of them are vintages, which Mark will talk about a bit more. And, you know, that's where we are.
So before we crack on into these wines, I thought I'd just touch briefly on 2016. So you'll notice on the labels that they're vintage wines. And that's something which is quite dear to our heart. We're really keen to release vintage wines, sparkling wines. All our wines are intended to be vintage. This is from 2016, which was not tricky, but it wasn't the easiest of vintages. 2016 started off quite cool. Those who live in the UK will remember that the winters of 2014-15 were really quite cold. And leading into 2016, we had quite a late start, really. We had quite a cool May. May is a keen time for us because it's when all the growth really starts happening. But normal bud burst in sort of mid-April, cool May, but then we had an incredible summer. And people forget this, but everyone remembers back to 2018, and we all remember the 2018 summer being exceptional in the UK. But 2016 was actually a really good summer. It was lovely and warm through the months of July, August, and then into September. We had what we call an Indian summer. I don't know the origin of that expression, but basically means that the summer rolls on into September. And we had really lovely warm days. And so September and October were still quite warm. But July and August, the average temperatures, June, July, August, were all above 21 degrees on average. So we had some nice warm periods during that. So it produced some really good grapes and really good wines. And that's one of the things which I suppose our location really helps us with. Because of where we are, we're only 3 miles from the sea. We get these sea breezes which come in the afternoons and really dry out the grapes. And it means that we're able to hold our fruit on the vines for a lot longer than some of our neighbours a little bit further north. And I think that really means that we have very ripe fruit, and it's really has very, very low disease risk. So I remember you like talking about Rick.
So Rick was a big Kiwi. I used to call him a man mountain, who worked for us, and he'd worked all over the world. And he used to say, and I can't do a Kiwi accent very well, but he used to say, it's the cleanest fruit I've ever seen. And I think that is testament to the fact that we do have these cooling, the winds that come through and keep our fruit nice and clean. And even in times when I think last year there was more challenge over disease across England, and we had very, very little.
We had a very little bit of botrytis, which was the first time we've ever had botrytis on the fruit when we pick in October. And similar to most English vineyards, in England you're typically picking fruit in the month of October, normally the middle to the end of October. And so you get those lovely developed flavours within an English sparkling wine, which you don't necessarily get from every other region. And I think that's because of, what I like to call, I don't know if this is a technical term, but hang time. The fruit is hanging on the vines for a long period of time. You get wide diurnal temperatures, obviously in the autumn, cool nights, warm days, and that really locks in some lovely flavours. And you'll hopefully taste those in the wines.
I think it's also worth mentioning, as a single site estate that we own it in its entirety, we also can manage our fruit, can't we? So, we can choose. Yeah. Yes. What's that technical term?
Well, we can choose. We know exactly what's happened to the fruit, but more importantly, we can manage the yield, and therefore, like a lot of other estates which control their own vineyards, we can manage the yield, and therefore our aim is to produce fantastic fruit to make great wines. It's not just about getting the biggest yield, because we're being paid by the ton.
Yeah.
So we can drop fruit.
That was the technical term I was looking for.
Technical term, dropping fruit. So you can actually green prune, and so you can actually take fruit off as late as really early September, early to mid-September, if things are looking a bit cooler and you're worried about the temperatures and the ripeness. We're not going to taste the 2017, which is a rosé, but in 2017 that was a really good year to talk about, because 2017 was a year when it was quite cool. We had a really cool summer, and in early September we were starting to get a little bit worried about ripeness. But in fact, we had an incredibly warm spell in September, and we had really, really ripe fruit again, picking in mid-October.
If we're talking about 2017, those of you may remember that it was a really, really bad winter. We had late spring frosts all across Europe, didn't we, from Rioja all the way up. And one thing to say is that we're very lucky at Rathfinny because we don't suffer from frost. So I don't know if you've read in the Post in the last week or two about the frosts that have been going across the country. And we're just lucky. I think it's because we're close to the sea, we're on a slope. I asked Cameron Roucher, our vineyard manager, in that year of 2017, when all of the wineries are very collaborative, everybody was talking and helping each other out. And I said to him, what did you do? And he said, Sarah, there was nothing I could do. I had another whiskey and I went to bed. And he said, the next day I realized I should have trusted our position and the sea more, because that really, really protects us. So
as we go along, we're going to talk a little bit about food. So one of the things which is quite dear to our heart is the fact that sparkling wine is a really good food pairing. Sarah, do you want to talk briefly about that? And then
this is my little bugbear.
Now, this gives you a chance to open the bottle if you haven't done already, because we're going to taste the classic cuvee first.
So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is sparkling wine. It has always been my favourite drink, even when it was not cool, really, to want to be able to drink sparkling wine. I'm going back to the 70s, the 80s. I grew up in Hong Kong, so I did manage to try champagne when I was out there. But you'll remember, I mean, at our wedding, we only had champagne for the toast. So I'm really pleased at the rise in sparkling wine, the ability to get it in good pubs, good restaurants now. But taking that on, I'm also really keen to be encouraging people to drink sparkling wine with all their courses, not just as a celebratory drink, but throughout the meal. And I'll talk a little bit more about the sort of things that I like to drink our wines with. I've got a question here from Adrian. Doing all single vintage sounds risky in the English climate. Do you have any reserve wine for insurance? So I'll go while you answer.
Yeah, so what we have across the vineyard is a multitude of different clones. And they perform really in different years. So we chose to buy clones from France and Germany. So we have some Geisenheim clones, particularly for our Pinot Noir, but also for our Chardonnay. And they give us slightly different characteristics, but the Geisenheim clones have basically been bred to have really open bunches. So if you imagine a Pinot Noir, you'll probably be aware that Pinot means it's pine. And so therefore they're really tight bunches. They're like a pine cone. They're really, really tight. So the disease pressure on Pinot Noir is much higher than a lot of other fruit. But we have clones which we brought in from Germany, which have got quite open bunches, which reduces disease pressure. But you're right, there is a risk that you can lose fruit, but we can control that risk by dropping fruit, by controlling the yield. And that allows the vine to be able to produce riper fruit in every year. We're still a very young vineyard. This is our 7th year that we'll be picking fruit from the vineyard. And touch wood, we haven't had a disaster so far. Anyway, look, hopefully you've poured the wine. We are big fans of these glasses. This is the Riedel champagne glass, which you'll see it's got a little diamond cut in the bottom, which allows there to be a little fine streak of bubbles coming up through the middle of it. But the reason we like to taste the wines in open, not flutes, but more open glasses, is that you can get your nose into it, but two, you can really taste the fruit, which is really important. These are aged wines. They're old. Well, not old, but they are, they're aged wines. This is 2016, so this is now 4 years. It's been in the bottle for 3 years on its yeast lees, and then it's been under cork for approximately 6 months or so. So therefore, you get all those lovely developed flavors, and hopefully, when you get your nose into it, you'll start to smell some of those lovely flavors. The first thing to point out about our classic cuvée is that it's slightly different to certain other English sparkling wines. In the majority of English sparkling wines are dominated by Chardonnay. My preference has always been Pinot Noir. I love Pinot Noir within sparkling wine. And this was the first year, 2016, when we actually had sufficient fruit to make what is basically a classic cuvée, is essentially a house style wine. And it's really reflective of the plantings that we have at Rathfinny. So we're about 45% Pinot Noir, about 35% Chardonnay, and about 17% or so Pinot Meunier. This wine is made from 57% Pinot Noir. It's written on the side of the bottle, 22% Chardonnay, and 21% Pinot Meunier. So it's dominated by Pinot Noir. In terms of style, it's similar to, think of big name champagnes, then it's something like a Bollinger or maybe a Paul Rocher. But if you get your nose into it, hopefully you'll start to taste some of those lovely fresh sort of red apples, and you start to get a little bit of red fruit as well. And then once you get it onto the palate, the thing that strikes me anyway is really just again those lovely ripe red apple type flavors. But we had a question.
Yeah.
Great that you only do vintages. Can you tell us why this is so important to you?
From Ant.
That's a really good question. To me, I feel that wines, sparkling wine in particular, champagne in particular, is it's the only wine category really that does non-vintage or multi-vintage wines. And my feeling is that actually there's a certain amount of flexibility within vintage, which enables you to be able to be a little bit flexible, because you can have up to 15% from wines from not that year, although none of our wines so far have. But what it does is it gives you that ability to be able to express the year. And yeah, there are good years and there's slightly less good years. But I feel that you want that, and I quite like that. I love to be able to reflect those really good years.
There's also,
and not to dilute those really good years by taking some back to add to less so good years.
And I was just going to say, there's also within a year that may be good, we find that we've had really good Chardonnay years, we've had really good Pinot years. So even within the different types, there, you can see the difference. And I think we just felt it was an opportunity to produce really interesting and individual wines. But as Mark says, we're a young vineyard, and that's our intention at the moment. And it's nice to be able to produce vintage wines. So this will be what I'd probably describe as our house wine.
Yes.
Wouldn't it? This is our entry level.
This is our entry level wine. It's retailing about £29.50, which is the recommended retail price. And so to us, it's accessible, and we were really keen to produce a wine which was very accessible, rather than some of the other wines which are a little bit more expensive. And this is still a very accessible wine, but I hope you agree it's got a nice style to it. It's got nice fruit. You've still got that lovely rich acidity, but it's showing a lot of character. And also you can taste some of the age. You get those sort of croissant, sort of brioche type flavors from the autolysis. It's been in the bottle, as I said, for 3 years. So you're getting those quite developed autolytic notes.
I must say, I found this a really exciting wine. I was completely new to this whole project when we started, so I'm not the wine buff that many of you are, or that Mark is. But I was really pleased to be able to produce a wine that I think is a really lovely quality, and as Mark says, that is really accessible. And going back to talk a little bit more about the food that I would have with this, with canapés, but I'd also have it with salmon gravlax. I love eating this with our homemade fish pie, and I really like it with Chinese food. So like crispy duck and plum sauce, a glass of this, fantastic. So I'd really encourage you to try that. I'm just moving over here because we've got some more questions, and welcome to people who've joined us. Oh, how do I move that, Mark?
Oh no, don't do that. There we go. Let's move that across.
Ian has said, I like the vintage habit, always good to have highs and lows. You can't have one without the other, or perhaps just call it differences. Absolutely. And that's what we will see as the years go on. Yeah.
You do have an ability to hold back some wines. So, 2018 was a very, very big year. And before we bottled our we bottled those 2018s, we were able to hold back a little bit, and literally only a couple of thousand litres, to look at for our 2019, to provide that sort of insurance for 2019. And it has been blended into our classic cuvée from 2019. So there is a little bit, but it's flexibility within the rules, and you're still producing essentially a vintage wine, which is over 85% from any one particular year. which, as I said, I think is important. It really does express that year. And yes, you do get those variations. You can get some years which are a little bit riper, but you could, as Sarah's saying, you can blend that with different fruit from across the estate. The other point to mention on this wine is that this is, although it's got this lovely rich acidity, all our wines go through a malolactic fermentation. So for those who are not aware of that, that's a secondary stage. So we go through the primary yeast fermentation, which creates the alcohol. And very soon, before that's finished, we add a bacteria to the wine to convert the malic acid into lactic acid, which just gives a lovely roundness, I think a creaminess in the palate. And I feel that takes off some of the edges. We don't suffer from lack of acidity within wines in England. You'll notice this wine, if you've been on our website, you may have seen the actual tasting notes. And there, the pH on this wine is actually 2.96, which is quite low for any wine, but for a sparkling wine, that's quite low. But you'll notice also that this has actually got a very low dosage. So the dosage on this wine is actually only 5 grams per litre, which again is a stylistic thing. I believe that I like low dosage within wines. I like them to have low sugar. When we look at dosage, and we do dosage trials before we put the cork in prior to disgorging. And we're tasting our wines with different levels of sugar, which you add just prior to putting the cork in. And the idea is to try and introduce a little bit of sugar, that liquor sugar, which just rounds off the wine, but it's not creating a new flavour, a new texture within the wine.
And not coating your mouth. Now, this is a low dosage of 5 grams per litre. Actually, it's out of our range. It's one of our higher dosages. Our other wines are even less because we really like the fruit to come through. And we play a horrible game with sommeliers when they come to visit us and say, guess the dosage. And many of them will actually guess higher, more around 7 or 8, whereas in fact, we're more around the 2, 3, 4 mark.
Yeah.
So,
but hopefully you like that wine. If there are any other questions, put them up on the chat bar or on the Q&A page, and we'll attempt to answer those.
I just wanted, while you're probably getting ready with the next wine, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the label and the journey that we took with that. So this has been a big journey. I had never done anything around marketing or branding or anything like that. So we have really learned as we went along. But one of the things that we wanted to do was to have something slightly quirky and slightly different. And I don't know whether you could, well, you've got the bottles there, but you can see across the top of the label, we've got the 7 Sisters. And I'm going to try and share a picture to show you the 7 Sisters. Mark, you might have to do this because you did it before. And when we first, there we are. Oh, you haven't shared yet. Okay. So, and when we first started this journey with our designers, they were very shocked at us suggesting that we did this. And I felt very strongly that we wanted to do something that was quite different. And I think in the sparkling wine category, we've got very used to a label that isn't straight across the top, but there aren't many. In fact, I can't think of any others out there. So that was one of the things. So there you can see the 7 Sisters Cliffs, which is what our design is based on. And as I say, that's only 3 miles from where we are.
So the 7 Sisters really marks the beginning of the South Downs. So the South Downs and the North Downs are both part of a chalk formation, which comes all the way up through France, comes all the way across southern England, and then goes out into the Atlantic.
As
the same band of chalk.
The same band of chalk as in Champagne. And you can certainly see the chalk there. So if we stop sharing that. Yeah. And then the other thing about our label, that just another few things, little do you realise how much work goes into all of this. So our shield is based on the Sussex shield. we had red because I'm from Hong Kong, and that's very lucky. And we also have worked really hard with our label to try and get it to replicate the chalk that we're based on. So those are the sort of key elements that went into that side of
the design
side of the business.
So I believe you've all got a bottle of the of our Blanc de Blanc. So should we talk a little bit about our Blanc de Blanc?
Just before we do, there's another question from Peter. You may have answered this, but I presume this is a traditional method. I don't have your wines today, but are they obtainable from you? It would be a lovely day out from Tunbridge Wells. Yes, very exciting.
Peter, well done. Great link.
Yeah, great link. I'm going to plug this now, because one of the things that this COVID crisis has made us do, and it is obviously a big challenge for everybody in the hospitality industry, is that within 6 weeks we have managed to put up our own e-commerce site, which goes live on Friday. So you can buy directly from us. You can also come down, our cellar door is open. You can click and collect, or just turn up and have a walk through the vineyard.
Yeah.
And yes, it is traditional method.
Yeah. All our wines are. So all English sparkling wine is made in the traditional method. So if anything has on the label English sparkling wine, it's all made in the traditional method. Has to be bottle aged, has to be made and left in the bottle for a period of a minimum of, I believe it's 12 months for an English sparkling wine. Ours are slightly different in the fact that we set up something called a PDO for Sussex. So we instigated this approximately 5 years ago and came up with a PDO for Sussex, for the region of Sussex. And there the wines have to be aged for slightly longer. It's about 15 months, which is exactly the same, follows the same rules as champagne. But for us, we like to age our wines for a minimum of 3 years. The reason for that is traditional method, you get all these lovely flavors. They develop really only after about 24 months. If you taste the wines during that time period, you get all these lovely differences of flavors. So when the wines first go into the bottle and the secondary fermentation is taking place, normally happens within 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, then you start to get bready flavors, really pronounced yeasty flavors. But as the wines develop in the bottle, they turn into more subtle flavors, like a sort of brioche type flavor. And then they end up like this, sort of slightly nutty. And that's the joy of aging. So yeah, they all are.
Would you say, I mean, to my palate, which isn't as great as everybody else's necessarily, but I would say that I notice a massive amount of difference in that final year of aging, because we will taste every
6 months.
Yeah, every 6 months or so, and you really do notice the real difference in that time.
Yeah. So really, that period after 2 years is quite important. So it starts to develop. 2 years, you're starting to develop those really good autolytic flavors. Obviously, if you leave it for longer, they start to develop other flavors as well. But what we're ideally looking for is a minimum of 3 years. Some of these wines we will eventually age probably for longer periods of time.
Just to finalise on that Sussex, if you see a bottle of wine that has Sussex on it, be it still or sparkling, it's really a mark of quality because it's gone through a very high testing process.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to the Blanc de Blanc, which we produced our first. I like that, Sussex Rocks. Well done.
I agree.
So we produced our first Blanc de Blanc in 2014.
Well, it was our first
release, which we released in 2018.
And it was very exciting. And somebody came up to us and they said, "Oh, you're so clever to have had your first release as a Blanc de Blanc." And Mark and I went, yes, as if this had been part of the great plan. Well, the truth is that we only had the Chardonnay, so that's why we did a Blanc de Blanc as our first release.
Yeah.
But
so
we took the credit anyway.
Yeah, it was very fortuitous to have really good Chardonnay in 2014. We didn't really have anything else. The 2016, we had our first real proper commercial harvest. And therefore, we were able to make, as Sarah said, this full range, this full portfolio of wines. We had some fantastic Chardonnay in that year, and we were really keen to make this into a Blanc de Blanc. Our Chardonnay is made with predominantly from Burgundy clones. So we talk about, within sparkling wine, we talk about the different clones because they all introduce different flavors. So if you think Champagne clones are typically a little bit more fleshy, slightly bigger berries, and they ensure yield. They have lovely characters to them. They've got good acidity, and they produce a good backbone. As you go further south, you go into Burgundy and you start looking at the Burgundy clones, then you end up with a lot more style within the wine, a little bit more finesse, slightly smaller berries, and therefore you're getting more concentrated flavors. And our Blanc de Blanc is typically made predominantly with Burgundy style or clones of grape. And you'll get that immediately on the nose because it's just got that really, really rich. Once you get beyond the SO2, sorry, the CO2, you start to really smell this developed, orchard apple flavors. It's got that lovely pronounced sort of fresh red apple skins, really.
It's also got lemon though, but a richer, like a lemon curd, and a beautiful honeysuckle colour.
And then on the palate, it's got, again, that lovely sort of developed sort of rich red apples, but also a little bit of sort of, in a way, sort of grapefruit perhaps. And then that lovely peachy finish, which you get from Chardonnay. And it's a lovely wine. You taste this, it's got such length to it. Now that's developed by a couple of things. We find when we do dosage, again, trials, when we're adding a little bit of sugar before putting the cork in, after the secondary fermentation in the bottle, then you add a little bit of sugar just to round off the wine. And what we find is that with keeping the dosage low, you get greater length.
So
this has got just terrific length.
And this is just 4 grams per litre.
So it's very, very dry. This could be classed as an extra dry or extra brut, not extra dry, extra brut, because brut is typically, it's below 12 grams, but below 6, it's a classification of, this is the residual sugar in the wine, and below 6, you can class it as an extra brut. So typically a Blanc de Blanc, the majority of Blanc de Blancs in the market are probably about 8 or 9. So to have a wine which you've released with 4 grams, I think again is just, it's a sign of confidence that we have within the fruit, that the fruit flavour takes the wine through. So I don't know, those who've got the wine, I know you all haven't got the wine, but those who have.
Now there's a question from Ian, but I can let you.
Why the lower plant?
But there's more down below, but I can't get to it. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
And can you talk about your planting plan, when it started, and is it ongoing?
Yeah.
So why the lower density?
So the lower density is really because of mechanization. So we plant in a modern sort of new world style where we have high trellises. So our trellises are typically about 2 meters high.
You've got a picture.
And I might be able to show a little picture of this. That's actually. Nice. Yeah. And
most of our vines are high grafted as well, aren't they?
Yeah. So, but they are. Let me see if I can just show you a little picture of this. Share screen. So there we go. I'll just share that. So you can see there that the trellising, they can't see that, that's it. There we go. So the high trellising, you can see that these guys are busy going through their shoot thinning, which is what's happening at the moment within the vineyard. This is a picture from last year, so it's from early June. We had a very good start to the year last year, so everything took off really quickly. But a bit slower this year, but doing really well now. But as you can see, they're shoot thinning, but you can see the trellising posts are high. So therefore, if you imagine, if you've got high trellising posts, Therefore, you're going to have a greater amount of shading from that trellis, from the fruit and the vines. Therefore, you have to have wider rows. So our rows are 2.1 meters apart, and our fruit is typically at about 1.1, 1.2 meters. So that's our fruiting wine, and that's the reason why we have less density.
Just while we're on that picture, just talking about employment and our seasonal workers and people who come to work at Rathfinny. One of the things that's been really important to Mark and me is to develop an industry locally. And so we've worked really hard to employ local people.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to stand us in good stead. It has financial implications, no doubt, because we have to train everybody. We have to use our best people to train. People who are learning a new skill are slower. But every year we get more and more people coming, and they tend to come for harvest. So last year we had 200 local pickers who all came from within 10 miles, apart from people who had made an effort to come and camp or stay with us to pick.
It's been a lot of hard work.
It's been a lot of hard work, but as I say, it's really starting to pay back, and we have these regular people now. So the second question was about the planting plan. When it started right at the beginning. Yeah.
So we bought the land in 2010, hence it's our 10-year anniversary this year. We started that plan then, using various different consultants within the industry. And we planned to plant in stages. So we planted 20 hectares or 50 acres at a time for a period of about 3-4 years. Then we slowed down because we had a big vineyard and we were struggling to keep up, maintaining the growth and training people. Because again, England is a very, very new industry. It's a nascent industry in the UK. So you're constantly having to train people as we go along. It's difficult to find sufficient people who really want to work in vineyards. So we've trained all our staff really. 3 of them have come from Plumpton College, but the rest we've trained up on site.
But we were tired as well, because when you plant, you've got to put all the trellising in and all the wires. So we gave ourselves some time along the way. And
so, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, going back to our planting plan, because there was about an 18-month lead-in to ordering your vines and before they come, it was one of the first things Mark had to do. So right at the beginning, baby student at Plumpton, he's got all the books out, trying to work out what vines we were going to order.
Yeah. So again, hopefully you've had a taste of this wine, those who've got it. This is, again, becoming quite widely available from this Friday. There are several off-licenses wine merchants who will be taking this wine.
Get it through 67.
Through 67 Pall Mall. And I believe it's going on the list there as well when the club reopens.
But it's still a fairly small, the number of bottles is on the side.
Yeah, so there are only 5,700 bottles of this. So it's a very small release of a Blanc de Blanc, but I think this wine will age really well as well in the bottle. It's got that, it's got all that lovely fruit, but it's got that lovely rich acidity, which will allow it to age. It's only had 6 months under cork, and I think hopefully you'll agree that it's tasting really nice, really integrated. Lovely rich acidity, but again, really good fruit and good length.
For me, when I taste this, I just want to have an oyster. And I think it's the salinity, and we've talked about this before. We sort of feel there's an effect from being so close to the coast. Something about the salt air and the sea. So yes, I would always match this with oysters as my preference. But again, looking at other courses that it goes with, fantastic with crispy pork belly. We paired it when we had our dinner at the Gavroche. First time Michel Roux had paired an entire menu to English wines, all ours, and he paired this with his double-baked cheese souffle. So if you've had that, it's completely divine.
I think the Gavroche is the only restaurant, and it's the only place in town, actually in London, that's still got some of our 2014 Blanc de Blanc as well. But it's a lovely wine. I think it would work really well with some desserts as well, certain cheeses. But if you think of, that peachiness would go so well with a peach dish, or, perhaps a lemon cheesecake. But there's another question.
Adrian, is our cellar door open now? It will be open on Friday.
Yeah.
So that's the day of our big launch and the day that our e-commerce site goes up. And we are hoping when lockdown lifts to be able to start getting people back on the estate. We're looking at doing picnics in the estate and possibly using our large balcony so that people can come and try our wines.
Yeah. Again, this is a wine which I think its acidity is disguised by that rich fruit. Again, it goes through 100% malolactic, so it's got that roundness, it's got that creaminess. And hopefully people are enjoying it. I am, anyway.
We've got a winemaker who likes to take his time and likes the wine to take its time. So there is a period of time in the year where we have meetings every week or so, and we say, how's the wine? It's still going through malolactic.
Yes.
But I think
he's French, very French. Jonathan Medard, his father used to work for Moet, and his grandfather as well. So I always say he has bubbles in his blood, but he, as Sarah said, he leaves the wines to really develop those lovely rich flavours.
So just while you're finishing trying our Blanc de Blanc, maybe just talk a little bit about our Blanc de Noir.
Two other wines. So one of my favourite wines is a Blanc de Noir. So we're trying to educate people more about Blanc de Noir. So a Blanc de Noir is, those who don't know, is a white wine made from black grapes. And in this case, it's Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. With this, it's predominantly Pinot Noir. It's 91% Pinot Noir from 2016. Pinot Noir is a great food wine. And when it's in sparkling, as a Blanc de Noir, makes a fantastic food-friendly wine, which works so well with all kinds of different dishes, from meat dishes like lamb or possibly venison.
If you think of
big
lamb,
rich fish.
Yeah. If you think of lamb and having it with red currant jelly, try our Pinot Noir with a lovely Sussex lamb dish, and it really cuts through it. It's beautiful.
Again, it's a lovely wine. It's from 2016. It's been aged for 3 years in the bottle. Lovely, rich, developed flavors, and again, tasting really well. Our 2015 wine, there's still some of it available, but it sold out pretty quickly. There was some which was brought back from the on-trade because of the closures, because of COVID, and that's been made available through our cellar door. But we're now transitioning onto the 2016 Blanc de Noir because there are literally only a handful of bottles left.
Yeah.
And the fourth wine that we produce is a rosé. And our rosé with the pink foil is made predominantly again of Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, but we also use a little bit of Chardonnay. It's about 20% Chardonnay in the blend. And that allows I think it helps the palate in my opinion. It helps give length and improve the palate, gives it a little bit of breadth. But what it does for me is it helps also with some of the length. To me, this wine should be fun. A rosé should be fun, and this is a fun wine. It's a wine which was, we always release a year younger. So it still has really, really developed fruit flavors. And it's not dominated by autolytic flavors. So it's really crisp and young and fresh.
And it's a lovely colour as well. It's a lovely salmony pink. It's not what I would call a bubblegum pink.
Yeah.
And a really, really delicious
wine. And good food wine as well.
As we said, that was 2017 vintage, and we talked about what a difficult year that was. For those of you that are interested, we have started very sort of slowly and quietly. We released what we call Rathfinny Reserved. So last year we gave people the opportunity to be able to buy our classic cuvée from 2017, a sort of en primeur. Partly that was because we've got a loyal following, and we were only able to sell one bottle of each wine per person when they visited, because we just didn't have enough and we wanted people to be able to try it. Obviously that's changed a bit this year, so that's a good news for people who want to be able to get more. But for Rathfinny Reserved, and we probably will do it again this year, this is where we will release a certain amount of wine early that people can buy, and we store it.
Anyway, hopefully that's given you a bit of a taste of our wines. It's told you a little bit more about Rathfinny. You've now got a picture of where we are. You're now all desperate to jump on the train or get in your cars and come down and see us.
I really would encourage you to. It's so beautiful. I know that our daughter went and had a great walk along the cliffs over the weekend and just said it was fantastic. So if you feel like getting out when we can, keep an eye on our website for when we're open. And I'm just going to ask if anyone's got any other questions before we sign off. Oh, here's one from Nick. I live in a village on the southern slopes of the North Downs, Chapel Down country. Nye Timber has just started planting 130 acres of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir on our doorstep. Having hung your hats on Sussex Sparkling and the PDO, would you ever consider using Kentish grapes and experimenting with an alternative terroir?
The answer is no. So we
this is enough.
No, this is enough. So we when we bought the land, we bought it with the express intention of being able to use all our own grapes from our own site and being able to make our own wines from our own site. And nothing about nothing bad about Kent. The North Downs is proving to be a very good place to grow grapes and make wines. You probably heard a few years ago, Tattinger bought some land on the North Downs and had planted a vineyard there as well, which again sort of shows the strength of English wine. Really, it's a big thumbs up to English wine, and they're finding similar success because on the North Downs you have the chalk as well. There are certain sites which I know are doing very, very well. Nye Timber have also planted there, and Simpsons, and there are various other producers in England who are making some really stunning wines from that area. But we're really keen on promoting where we are. I believe that wines are known from their regions, and this is where we come from. We come from Sussex, and we understand the Kent growers are thinking about establishing their own PDO for the Kentish region. Yeah. Anyway,
great. We're getting lovely comments from people, so thank you so much for those comments. Do come and see us, and you know, any more questions, just let us know. Drop us an email.
Hey, Mark and Sarah, thank you so much. Very exciting that you're about to open the cellar door, and this is kind of 10 years of work about to pay off. Yeah.
Yes, well, we had a small cellar door open, Ronan, until obviously COVID struck, and therefore we had to close it down. And we've decided to reopen it. As you know, off license are seen as what's the word? Critical.
Critical. Obviously, everyone needs
critical.
alcohol.
You need alcohol.
We were doing free local deliveries within 10 miles, and there was such a demand that we thought, well,
yeah, we'll reopen the cellar door. People can come in and buy directly.
All with social distancing and all of that in place. So that's where I'm off down there tomorrow in my mucky old clothes to get it all sorted to open on Friday, as with our e-commerce site.
Yeah. But thank you very much. Thanks for all your time. You know, I'd just say come and visit. Remember to look for English wines, English sparkling wines on the wine list. I think that there's some terrific value and really high quality wines. So really recommend you try that.
Just as you say that, just before we leave, one of the exciting things we've been noticing is that not only are really good restaurants and bars now having English sparkling wine as a category in its own right, but they are also beginning to have other categories. So you can see Sussex as a category in its own right at places like the American Bar in the Savoy, Coburg Bar at the Connaught, so that's really exciting to see. A message from Monica, who's got our rosé to enjoy on your wedding day. Have a fabulous wedding whenever it is, and send us a picture because I'd love to see it.
Really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Ronan,
And
thank you.
Thank you, Ronan, for hosting, and take care.